Welcome everyone. My name is Jerry Lozano. I'm an instructor for RxM. And in this short take, we're going to look at the module called Pod Basics. In this module, we talk about exactly what a pod is and how pods are created and controlled on Kubernetes. In this chapter, we'll do several demonstrations. So let me show you a couple of those demonstrations right now. In this first demonstration, we'll explain that a pod in Kubernetes consists of one or more containers. And so Kubernetes schedules and launches pods. And so in general, one Kubernetes pod contains one container. Let's do our demonstration by launching our first pod. And we will do so declaratively. We'll just issue the command from the command line. We'll use the kubectl command to run a new pod based on the image HTTPD. In other words, the Apache image. And we'll give it an appropriate name, like Apache. And the pod is created. We can use the kubectl command to get information about all the pods running in Kubernetes by just saying get pods after kubectl. And we see that the pod called Apache is up and running. If we do the same command, but this time use the -o wide switch, we get more information about each pod running on the system, including the IP address. At this point, is Apache actually running? Let's find out. Let's curl to 10.32.0.4, the IP address assigned to the Kate's pod. And indeed, it works. We see that Apache came back with "it works" in standard HTML tag format. Okay, so how would I stop the Apache pod? I would use, once again, kubectl to delete the pod whose name is Apache. And it stops. At this point, if I go back and list the pods that are running on the system, I get none. So to create pods is a simple task in Kubernetes. Again, this was done declaratively. I typed the command in on the console. This is probably not going to work well for a production environment where we literally can have hundreds of pods running at one time, starting up dynamically, being shut down dynamically as we scale up and down a large application. So the other way to create a pod is imperatively to write a specification file, a spec file, that describes exactly what the pod is, what image it's based on, plus any other important information, such as tagging it with labels or specifying information like volumes, persistent volumes that it wants to attach to. The easy way to create a spec file for a resource like a pod is to use the kubectl command with the dry run switch. The dry run switch allows us to pretend that we are creating a pod. So I'll use the same command that I did before, give it a name like Apache, but this time we say that we want to output our information in YAML format. That is the typical way, the typical format that we use to write a spec file in. Then we use the -- dry run switch, and we specify that we want to create the file for a client. We can redirect the output of this command to to some file, like my Apache pod.yaml. At this point, we can look at the file that was created. And there you see a typical YAML specification for a Kubernetes resource. What kind of resource would get created with this file? A pod. Okay, it has labels like run:\Apache. The name of the pod will be Apache. The specification for this pod contains a list of containers that will be launched with this pod, all one of them. So our containers, plural list, has only one container in the YAML specification. The image is HTTPD, the name is Apache, and that's what we have. Now, how many pods are running right now as a result of using that command? None. To use this specification, we use the kubectl command with the apply subcommand, and we specify the name of the file that we wish to use for our spec file. Now the pod Apache gets created, and now get pods shows that that pod is up and running. Pod creation is just one of the things you'll learn in the Pod Basics module from RxM. On rxm.com, you can build your own custom Kubernetes course with the courseware builder, and you can find the Pod Basics module under the Kubernetes section here. That's our cloud native short take, Pod Basics module.